The Kythera battleship. Divine judgment hung in the void above Earth like a silver sword poised to strike. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed behind his back as he watched the blue-green planet slowly rotate beneath them. The human homeworld was beautiful, he had to admit, even if its inhabitants were nothing more than primitive warmongers. "Commander!" his tactical officer called out, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of their species. "The planetary bombardment systems are fully charged. We can begin sterilization procedures on your command." Veltar nodded slowly. The decision had already been made by the High Council. Humanity had proven itself too dangerous to be allowed to develop further. In the past century alone, they had fought 2 devastating global wars, developed nuclear weapons, and were now taking their first tentative steps into space. The pattern was clear to anyone who cared to look. Soon they would spread their violence beyond their homeworld, and the galaxy would suffer for it. "Status report on the evacuation zones?" Veltar asked. 73% of major population centers have been cleared using our sonic displacement fields. The humans have been relocated to the designated preservation areas on the northern continents. Minimal casualties reported. The Kythera had spent 3 months carefully herding Earth's population away from the areas they intended to destroy. It was more mercy than most species received when the Galactic Council deemed them a threat. Usually, problematic civilizations were simply erased completely. But something about humanity had struck a chord with certain members of the Council. Perhaps it was their art, which had been analyzed and found to contain surprising depth and beauty. Or maybe it was their capacity for both great cruelty and unexpected kindness, often displayed by the same individuals. Whatever the reason, the Council had decided to preserve a small breeding population while destroying their industrial capacity and military infrastructure. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the surface," the communications officer announced. "It's coming from their largest city, the one they call New York. The signal appears to be directed specifically at us." Veltar's mandibles clicked in curiosity. "Put it through." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a human male in what appeared to be formal attire. He looked to be in his middle years, with graying hair and tired eyes. Behind him, Veltar could see the distinctive skyline of the human metropolis, though several buildings showed signs of damage from the sonic displacement fields. "My name is Secretary General Harrison," the human said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "I speak for the United Nations of Earth. We understand that you intend to limit our civilization. We accept that we cannot stop you, but I have one request to make." Veltar found himself intrigued. Most species begged for mercy at this point or made futile threats. This human seemed remarkably composed. "Speak," Veltar commanded, his translator rendering his words into the human's language. "We know we've made mistakes," Harrison continued. "We know we're violent, that we fight among ourselves, that we've done terrible things. But we also know we can be better. Some of us anyway. What I'm asking is this. Don't just preserve a few thousand of us like specimens in a zoo. Give us a chance to prove that we can change. Give us a purpose." "What kind of purpose?" Veltar asked, though he was already certain the Council's decision would not be altered. "Use us as soldiers." The bridge fell silent. Even Veltar was taken aback by the request. Harrison continued. "You must have enemies. Every advanced civilization does. Use our aggressive tendencies for something productive. We'll serve the Galactic Council faithfully if it means our species gets to survive and grow." Veltar considered the proposal. It was true that the Kythera had been struggling with several rebellious systems on the outer rim of their territory. The Draxan Collective had been particularly troublesome, their hive-mind warriors proving difficult to counter with conventional tactics. And there had been reports of unknown ships attacking Council vessels in the void sectors, though no one was sure who was responsible. "Your proposal has merit," Veltar admitted. "But humanity's aggression is precisely why you are being limited. How do we know you would not simply turn on us once you gained strength?" "Because," Harrison said, and for the first time, a slight smile crossed his face. "We understand gratitude. You could have killed us all. You're choosing not to. That means something to us, more than you probably realize." The conversation continued for another hour. Harrison was joined by other human leaders, scientists, and military officers. They presented detailed proposals for how human forces could serve the Council, how their children could be educated in Kithara values, how their aggression could be channeled into productive purposes. It was Admiral Kethrin who finally suggested they present the proposal to the High Council. As Veltar's superior and the overall commander of the human operation, her word carried significant weight. 3 days later, the response came back. The Council was intrigued. They had decided to implement a limited trial program. 1 million humans would be preserved in their entirety, not just as a breeding population, but as a functional society. They would be relocated to a moon in the Xerion system, given basic technology, and allowed to develop under Kithara guidance. If they proved useful and loyal, the program would be expanded. If they proved troublesome, they would be eliminated. Veltar found himself assigned as the liaison between the Kithara Military Command and the new human settlement. It was, his superiors told him, an honor. In reality, he suspected it was because he had been the one to recommend accepting Harrison's proposal. The relocation took 6 months. The humans were remarkably cooperative, which surprised many of the Kithara observers. They organized themselves efficiently, maintained order despite the stress of leaving their homeworld, and showed genuine gratitude for the opportunity they had been given. Harrison, who had been elected as the leader of the human settlement, proved to be an effective administrator. He established schools where human children learned both their own history and Kithara culture. He organized work crews that helped with the construction of their new city, and he formed a militia that trained daily in both human and Kithara combat techniques. The moon they had been given, designated as Kepler 442c, was actually quite habitable. It had a breathable atmosphere, adequate water supplies, and fertile soil for agriculture. The humans named their new home Haven and set about building a society unlike anything they had created on Earth. 5 years passed. The human population had grown to nearly 1.2 million through births and new arrivals from Earth's preservation zones. Their technology had advanced significantly with Kithara assistance, though they were carefully prevented from developing anything that could threaten their benefactors. More importantly, they had proven their worth as soldiers. The first test had come 2 years after their relocation. A Draxan raiding fleet had attacked a Kithara mining station in the Helios sector. Traditional Kithara forces had struggled to repel them, as the Draxans' hive mind coordination made them nearly impossible to outmaneuver. Veltar, now promoted to admiral and serving as the official human liaison, had suggested deploying a human strike force. The humans' chaotic, individualistic fighting style might be exactly what was needed to confuse the highly organized Draxan warriors. He had been right. Led by a former Earth military officer named Colonel Sarah Martinez, the human strike force had torn through the Draxan raiders like a force of nature. Where the Kithara fought with precision and coordination, the humans fought with unpredictable fury and adaptability. They used tactics that no civilized species would consider: suicide runs, false retreats, even deliberate friendly fire to eliminate compromised units. The Draxan hive mind simply couldn't process such seemingly irrational behavior. Their attempts to predict and counter human movements failed repeatedly. Within 6 hours, the entire raiding fleet had been destroyed, with minimal human casualties. Word of the victory spread quickly through Kithara space. Admiral Kethrin personally commended the human forces and recommended them for more difficult assignments. The High Council began to take a serious interest in expanding the human program. But it was the discovery in the void sectors that really changed everything. The unknown attackers that had been harassing Council vessels turned out to be scouts from something called the Terminus Empire. Intelligence reports suggested a massive military force from outside the galaxy was preparing for invasion. The Terminus apparently viewed the Milky Way as a suitable target for conquest and resource extraction. Traditional diplomatic overtures had failed. The Terminus representatives had been contemptuous of the Council's attempts at negotiation, dismissing them as weak and unworthy. They had given the galaxy one solar cycle to surrender unconditionally or face total war. It was Harrison who first suggested that humanity might be uniquely suited to deal with this threat. "From what you've told us about these Terminus forces," he said during a strategy meeting on Haven, "they sound like they respect only strength and aggression. They see your diplomatic nature as weakness, but they've never encountered anything like us." Admiral Veltar, now one of Harrison's closest confidants despite their different species, found himself nodding in agreement. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Let us make first contact with them," Harrison said simply. "Not as representatives of the Galactic Council, but as humans. Let them see what we're really capable of when we're not being civilized." The proposal was radical, even dangerous. If the humans failed, they might provoke the Terminus into attacking sooner than planned. But if they succeeded, they might buy the galaxy time to prepare its defenses. After much debate, the Council agreed to the plan. The human delegation that traveled to the edge of Terminus space consisted of 50 individuals, all volunteers. They included diplomats, soldiers, scientists, and artists. Harrison led the group personally, despite his advanced age. Their ship was a modified Cathara vessel, but with human modifications that made it look far more aggressive than typical Council designs. The humans had insisted on this, claiming that first impressions would be crucial. The meeting took place on a neutral station in the interstellar void between galaxies. The Terminus representatives were exactly as reports had described. Tall, heavily armored beings with a culture built entirely around conquest and dominance. Their leader, who called himself War Master Zephon, radiated an aura of controlled violence. "So," Zephon said, his voice a mechanical rasp through his armor's speakers, "the Council sends pets to negotiate? How appropriate." Harrison smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "We're not here to negotiate," he said calmly. "We're here to explain what's going to happen to you if you attack our territory." The Terminus delegates erupted in what could only be described as laughter, though it sounded more like weapons fire. Zephon raised a clawed hand for silence. "You amuse me, little creature. Tell me, what makes you think your soft Council allies could threaten the might of the Terminus Empire?" "Oh, they couldn't," Harrison agreed. "But we're not Council allies. We're something else entirely." What followed was one of the most unusual diplomatic presentations in galactic history. Instead of discussing peace treaties or trade agreements, Harrison calmly explained human history. He told them about their wars, their weapons, their capacity for both creative destruction and stubborn survival. He showed them footage from Earth's conflicts, images of human soldiers fighting in conditions that would kill most sapient species. But it was the psychological profile that really got their attention. "You see," Harrison explained, "most species fight to win. They have logical goals: territory, resources, survival. Humans are different. We fight because we enjoy it. We've literally built our entire civilization around conflict. Every advancement we've made, every piece of technology we've developed has been driven by our desire to kill each other more efficiently." Zephon leaned forward, suddenly interested. "The Council thinks they've domesticated us," Harrison continued. "They think they've given us purpose and direction. What they don't understand is that we let them believe that. We're using them to spread throughout the galaxy, to learn about other species, to understand the weapons and tactics of our potential enemies. "And why are you telling us this?" Zephon asked. Harrison's smile widened. "Because we want you to attack. We've been preparing for war our entire lives. Every human child dreams of the day we get to fight someone who's actually worthy of our attention. The Cathara are too civilized, too peaceful. They bore us. But you might actually be fun." The silence that followed lasted for nearly a minute. When Zephon finally spoke, there was something new in his voice, something that might have been respect. "You are either the most honest being I have ever encountered, or the most skilled liar." "Does it matter?" Harrison asked. "Either way, you know what you're facing now. The question is, are you sure you want to find out which one it is?" The meeting ended without any formal agreements, but the message had been delivered. The Terminus expedition returned to their own galaxy to report what they had learned. 3 months later, long-range sensors detected the Terminus fleet changing course. Instead of heading toward Council space, they had turned toward a different galaxy entirely. The threat was over, at least for the time being. When Harrison and his delegation returned to Haven, they were greeted as heroes. The Galactic Council formally recognized humanity as a full-member species and granted them significant autonomy in their affairs. The human population was allowed to expand to 10 million, with new settlements established on 3 additional worlds. But Veltar, watching the celebrations from his quarters aboard the orbital command station, felt a growing unease. He had known Harrison for 7 years now, had worked closely with him, had come to consider him a friend, and that was exactly why the human leader's performance at the Terminus meeting worried him. Because Veltar was absolutely certain that Harrison hadn't been lying. The realization that would later prove prophetic came to him slowly over the course of several sleepless nights. The Cathara had believed they were showing mercy to humanity by preserving them, by giving them purpose and direction. They had thought they were saving a species from its own violent nature. Instead, they had given humanity exactly what it needed most: an enemy to fight, a cause to unite behind, and access to galactic-level technology and resources. As Veltar watched human ships departing Haven on training missions and cultural exchanges with other species, he began to understand the true scope of what his people had unleashed. The humans weren't grateful for the Kithara's mercy. They were grateful for the opportunity. 10 years had passed since the Terminus crisis, and Admiral Veltar found himself standing in the same position he had occupied above Earth so long ago. But this time, he wasn't looking down at humanity's homeworld. He was staring at the wreckage of a Cathara battle fleet, scattered across the Helix Nebula like broken toys. The irony wasn't lost on him. The very species his people had once considered too dangerous to live freely had just saved a dozen Cathara worlds from annihilation. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship Retribution. It's Director Martinez requesting permission to board." Veltar's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned to recognize as resigned amusement. Sarah Martinez had come a long way from the colonel who had led that first strike against the Draxan raiders. Now she commanded the entire human military apparatus, a force that had grown far beyond anything the Galactic Council had ever intended to create. "Permission granted," Veltar replied. "Have her escorted to my ready room." As he waited for Martinez to arrive, Veltar reflected on how dramatically the situation had changed. What had started as a simple preservation program had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity hadn't just survived their relocation, they had thrived beyond all expectations. The first sign of trouble had come 5 years after Haven's establishment. A routine inspection by Cathara officials had revealed that the human population had somehow grown to nearly 3 million, despite official records showing only 1.2 million. When questioned, Harrison had simply smiled and explained that they had been more efficient than expected at reproduction. The truth was far more complex. Using their growing fleet of research vessels, humans had been secretly evacuating additional populations from Earth's preservation zones. Small groups at a time, never enough to trigger Kythera monitoring systems, but steady enough to triple their numbers within a few years. More concerning was the discovery that humans had established unauthorized settlements on 14 different worlds across 3 star systems. They called them research stations and agricultural outposts. But Kythera intelligence quickly recognized them for what they really were, military staging areas. The door chimed and Director Martinez entered. She was older now, her hair completely gray, but she moved with the same predatory grace that had made her such an effective combat leader. Behind her came 2 younger humans, a man and a woman, both wearing the distinctive black uniforms of human military intelligence. "Admiral," Martinez said, offering the slight bow that humans had adopted as a form of respectful greeting. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. After what your people accomplished here today, it's the least I can do," Veltar replied, gesturing for them to take seats around his conference table. 57 Kythera vessels destroyed by the Nexari fleet, and you managed to save most of the crews. The Council will be grateful. "Gratitude isn't why we're here," Martinez said bluntly. "We need to talk about the future, Admiral. All of our futures." Veltar had been expecting this conversation for months. The Nexari War had been a wake-up call for every species in the galaxy. A previously unknown alien confederation had emerged from the galactic core, wielding weapons and tactics that had proven devastatingly effective against traditional Council forces. In 18 months of fighting, the Nexari had conquered 47 star systems and destroyed or captured nearly 2,000 Council vessels. Their military doctrine was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They used quantum disruption fields that could tear apart Kythera ships from the inside, biomechanical fighters that adapted to enemy weapons in real time, and worst of all, they seemed to have an unlimited supply of both resources and personnel. Traditional Council tactics had proven useless. The Kythera's precision formations were slaughtered by Nexari swarm attacks. The Altarians' defensive strategies were overwhelmed by quantum bombardment. Even the mighty Drakmori battlecruisers had been reduced to scrap metal by Nexari adaptive weaponry. Only human forces had proven consistently effective against the new threat. "Your people have theories about why human tactics work so well against the Nexari," Veltar said. "I'd like to hear them." The younger man leaned forward. Veltar recognized him as Dr. James Chen, one of humanity's leading xenopsychologists. "It comes down to pattern recognition, Admiral. Every species in the Council fights according to established doctrines. You have procedures, protocols, standard operating procedures. The Nexari have been studying Council military tactics for decades, possibly centuries. They know exactly how each species will respond to any given situation. But humans don't follow established patterns," the woman added. She was Commander Lisa Park, head of Human Strategic Planning. "Our military doctrine is built around improvisation, adaptation, and deliberate unpredictability. When a human commander sees that their current strategy isn't working, they don't fall back to predetermined alternatives. They invent something new on the spot. More than that," Martinez continued, "humans are natural rule breakers. When the Nexari deploy a new weapon or tactic, Council forces try to develop countermeasures within existing strategic frameworks. Humans just ignore the rules entirely and try something nobody has ever thought of before." Veltar nodded slowly. He had seen this firsthand during the Battle of Kepler 438. Faced with a Nexari quantum disruption field that was systematically destroying his fleet, the human commander had ordered his ships to deliberately ram themselves into the field generators. It was tactically insane. Suicide attacks against an unknown enemy weapon. But it had worked. The resulting explosions had created feedback loops that destroyed the entire Nexari battle group. "So what are you proposing?" Veltar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Full military integration," Martinez said. "Not just human units supporting Council forces, but human commanders taking strategic control of mixed fleets. Human intelligence officers directing Council operations. Human scientists working with Council researchers to develop new weapons and tactics." "In other words," Veltar said slowly, "you want to run the war." "We want to win the war," Martinez corrected. "And right now, we're the only ones who seem capable of doing that consistently." It was a bold proposal, arguably an outrageous one. Humanity had been a galactic presence for barely 15 years, and now they were asking to take military command of civilizations that had existed for millennia. Under normal circumstances, the Council would have rejected such a suggestion immediately. But these weren't normal circumstances. "There's something else," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Our analysis of Nexari technology suggests they're not from this galaxy originally. We think they're advanced scouts for something much larger." "How much larger?" Veltar asked, though he was already dreading the answer. "Conservative estimates suggest a force at least 10 times the size of what we've seen so far," Commander Park replied. "Possibly much more. The Nexari appear to be testing our defenses, learning about our capabilities, preparing the way for a full-scale invasion." The implications were staggering. If the humans were correct, the current war was just a prelude to something far worse. And if traditional Council forces couldn't handle the advanced scouts, they would have no chance against the main invasion force. "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" Veltar asked. "Based on their expansion patterns and resource consumption, we estimate 18 to 24 months before the next wave arrives," Dr. Chen said. "After that, probably 6 months before the main force gets here." 2 years, Veltar mused. "To completely restructure the Council's military doctrine, integrate human command structures, and somehow develop weapons capable of fighting an enemy we barely understand." "It's not impossible," Martinez said, "but it will require some significant changes in how the Council operates." Over the next 3 hours, the humans laid out their proposals in detail. They wanted unified command structure with human officers in senior positions. They wanted access to Council research facilities and manufacturing capabilities. They wanted permission to recruit and train personnel from other species according to human military doctrine. Most controversially, they wanted the authority to implement what they called asymmetric defense strategies. Essentially, the right to use any tactics necessary to defeat the Nexari, regardless of existing Council regulations or ethical guidelines. Some of these proposals would fundamentally alter the nature of Council civilization, Veltar pointed out. "We've built our society around cooperation, consensus, and ethical conduct. What you're suggesting sounds more like military dictatorship," Martinez finished. "Yeah, we know how it sounds. But Admiral, with respect, cooperation and consensus are luxuries you can afford when you're not facing extinction. Right now, the galaxy needs to be run like a military operation, or there won't be a galaxy to run." It was a sobering thought, and one that Veltar found himself unable to argue against. The Nexari had demonstrated that they were entirely willing to commit genocide against species that resisted them. Entire civilizations had been wiped out, their homeworlds left as barren, lifeless rocks. "I'll present your proposals to the High Council," Veltar promised. "But I should warn you, there will be significant resistance. Many species view humans as too aggressive, too unpredictable. They're afraid of giving you this much power." "They should be afraid," Martinez said seriously. "We are aggressive and unpredictable. Those are exactly the qualities that make us effective against the Nexari. The question is, are they more afraid of us or of extinction?" The Council debate lasted for 6 days. species after species stood up to argue against the human proposals. The Altarians claimed that human military doctrine was fundamentally incompatible with civilized warfare. The Zephyrians worried that humanity would use their new authority to settle old grudges against species that had opposed them in the past. The Drakmori simply stated that they would never accept orders from primitive mammals, but the battle reports spoke for themselves. In every engagement where human forces had taken tactical command, Council losses had been reduced by an average of 70%. Nexari casualties had increased by over 300%. Most importantly, humans had actually begun winning battles, recapturing territory that had been lost to the invaders. The vote was closer than Veltar had expected. 847 in favor, 923 opposed, with 156 abstentions. Under normal council procedures, the proposal would have failed. But Harrison, now elderly and serving as humanity's chief diplomatic representative, had prepared for this possibility. Standing before the assembled delegates, he made one final argument. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice still strong despite his advanced age. "You're debating whether to trust us with military command of your forces. I understand your concerns. We're a young species, aggressive and unpredictable. We don't always follow your rules or respect your traditions." He paused, looking around the vast assembly hall. "But I want you to remember something. 15 years ago, you faced a choice about what to do with humanity. We were too dangerous to ignore, too violent to be allowed to develop freely. You could have destroyed us completely. Instead, you chose mercy. You gave us a chance to prove ourselves worthy of survival." Another pause. The hall was completely silent now. "Today, you face another choice. You can continue fighting this war according to your established principles and traditions, accepting defeat with honor and dignity. Or you can trust the species you once showed mercy to and let us fight this war the only way we know how, without mercy, without honor, and without dignity, but with the absolute determination to win." Harrison smiled, and Veltar felt a chill run through his carapace. "The choice is yours, but remember, you created us. You shaped us into what we are today. Everything we've become, every capability we've developed, every alliance we've formed, it all traces back to that moment when you decided to show us mercy instead of annihilation. We are your responsibility now. The question is, are you prepared to accept the consequences of your own compassion?" The final vote was taken the next day, 1,247 in favor, 634 opposed, with 45 abstentions. Humanity had been given command of the galaxy's defenses. As Veltar watched the human delegation celebrate their victory, he found himself thinking about that conversation with Harrison so many years ago when the human leader had first proposed using his people as soldiers. Harrison had promised that humans understood gratitude, that they would serve the Council faithfully in exchange for their survival. He had kept that promise, technically. Humans had served faithfully, had proven themselves valuable allies, had saved countless Council lives. But Veltar was beginning to understand that there were different kinds of faithfulness. Humans served the Council, yes, but they served it on their own terms, according to their own understanding of what service meant. And now they had been given the authority to reshape galactic civilization according to their own vision of what was necessary for survival. As he watched Director Martinez discussing tactical deployments with her staff, Veltar remembered something Harrison had said during that first meeting, something he hadn't fully understood at the time. "We understand gratitude," Harrison had said. "That means something to us, more than you probably realize." Veltar was beginning to realize exactly what it meant. The Cathara had saved humanity from extinction. Now humanity would return the favor. Whether the galaxy wanted to be saved or not, the war against the Nexari ended not with a bang, but with silence. Admiral Veltar stood in the command center of New Geneva Station, humanity's newly constructed military headquarters in orbit around Earth. Through the massive viewports, he could see the blue-green world that had once been scheduled for sterilization, now serving as the de facto capital of galactic civilization. The final Nexari stronghold in the Andromeda approach had fallen 3 days ago. After 5 years of brutal warfare, the galaxy was finally at peace. But as Veltar watched human technicians efficiently coordinating the movements of ships from a dozen different species, he wondered if peace was really the right word for what they had achieved. Director Martinez approached him, moving with the careful gait of someone whose body had been rebuilt multiple times by military medical technology. She had survived 6 different assassination attempts during the war, including one that had left her clinically dead for nearly 4 minutes. That she was still alive and in command was a testament to both human stubbornness and human medical science. "The final casualty reports are in," she said, handing him a data pad. "Total Council losses, 2.3 million military personnel, 847 ships, and 14 planetary colonies. Nexari losses, complete elimination of their invasion force, estimated at 47 million personnel and over 12,000 vessels." Veltar studied the numbers. By any objective measure, humanity's military leadership had been extraordinarily successful. They had not only repelled the Nexari invasion, but had systematically hunted down every last scout ship and forward base. The enemy force that had threatened to destroy galactic civilization had been completely eradicated. "Impressive results," he said finally. "The Council owes humanity a great debt." Martinez laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "The Council doesn't owe us anything, Admiral. We've already collected our payment." That was what worried Veltar. Over the course of the war, humanity had indeed collected payment for their services. They had been granted access to the most advanced Council technologies. They had established permanent military bases in over 200 star systems. They had recruited and trained personnel from dozens of species, creating a truly integrated military force that answered directly to human command. Most significantly, they had been given emergency powers that had never been rescinded. Powers that allowed them to override local governments, requisition resources, and enforce what they called security protocols on any world within Council space. The transformation had been gradual enough that most species hadn't realized what was happening until it was too late. It had started with simple military coordination, human officers working alongside Council commanders, sharing intelligence and tactical expertise. But as the war progressed and human methods proved increasingly successful, more and more authority had been delegated to human leadership. By the war's end, every major military operation in the galaxy was planned and executed under human direction. Every significant technological development was overseen by human scientists working with Council researchers. Every strategic decision was subject to human approval. The galaxy had won the war, but humanity had won the peace. "There's something we need to discuss," Martinez said, her tone becoming more formal. "The Council is planning to convene a victory celebration on Cathara Prime next week. They want to formally recognize human contributions to the war effort and begin discussions about returning to normal civilian governance." "That seems appropriate," Veltar said carefully. "The emergency powers were granted specifically for the duration of the conflict. Now that the conflict is over—" "The conflict isn't over," Martinez interrupted. "It's just paused." She activated a holographic display showing a star map of the local galactic cluster. Red markers indicated the known positions of Nexari forces before their invasion. Blue markers showed their advanced positions during the war. But it was the yellow markers that drew Veltar's attention, dozens of them, scattered throughout intergalactic space. "Our deep-range reconnaissance missions have confirmed what we suspected all along," Martinez explained. "The Nexari were just the advance force of something much larger. We estimate there are at least 6 other similar invasion fleets currently in transit toward various galaxies. 3 of them are headed our way. How long do we have? Veltar asked, though he was beginning to understand why Martinez looked so grim. First fleet arrives in approximately 18 months. The others will follow at 6-month intervals. Each fleet appears to be roughly twice the size of the force we just defeated. The implications were staggering. Just as the galaxy was preparing to celebrate victory and return to peacetime governance, humanity was telling them they were facing an even greater threat. A threat that would require continued military leadership and emergency powers. A threat that would require humanity to remain in control. "You're proposing to continue the war footing indefinitely," Veltar said. "I'm proposing to survive," Martinez replied. "Admiral, the Nexari were exploratory forces, scouts and skirmishers. What's coming next will be full-scale extermination fleets. They won't be interested in testing our defenses or learning about our capabilities. They'll be coming to kill everything that moves. And you believe human leadership is still necessary to repel them?" Martinez turned to face him directly. "I believe human leadership is the only thing that can save this galaxy. Not because we're better than other species, but because we're willing to do what other species won't." "Such as?" "Whatever it takes." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the communication system. A young human officer appeared on the display, his face tense with concern. "Director Martinez, we have a situation developing on Altarius Prime. The planetary government is refusing to implement the new defense protocols. They're claiming that the war powers no longer apply and demanding the withdrawal of human military personnel." Martinez sighed. "Patch me through to Governor Velnoth." The display switched to show an Altarian official, his crystalline features rigid with anger. Behind him, Veltar could see what appeared to be a large gathering of protesters. "Director Martinez," the governor said, his translator rendering his harmonics as cold formality, "I am calling to inform you that the Altarian Assembly has voted unanimously to reject your so-called defense protocols. We will not allow our world to be turned into a military fortress. We will not permit the conscription of our citizens into your armies, and we will not tolerate the continued occupation of our sovereign territory." "Governor," Martinez said calmly, "I understand your concerns, but the threat to galactic security hasn't ended with the defeat of the Nexari advance force. We have confirmed intelligence indicating—" "We don't care about your intelligence," Velnoth interrupted. "The Nexari have been defeated. The war is over. Your emergency powers are no longer valid. We demand that you withdraw all human personnel from Altarian space immediately." Martinez was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a tone that Veltar had learned to recognize as extremely dangerous. "Governor, let me make sure I understand your position. You're refusing to implement defensive measures against a confirmed threat. You're rejecting the military alliance that saved your world from destruction. And you're ordering the withdrawal of the forces that are currently protecting your system from attack. That is correct." "I see." Martinez paused. "And if I refuse?" "Then we will consider it an act of war against the Altarian Republic." Another pause. Veltar found himself holding his breath. "Governor," Martinez said finally, 3 days ago, my forces finished eliminating the last Nexari stronghold in your sector. During that operation, we captured their strategic archives. Would you like to know what we found?" Velnoth's crystalline features shifted slightly, the Altarian equivalent of confusion. "What are you talking about?" "A complete intelligence assessment of every Council world. The Nexari had been studying us for decades, mapping our defenses, analyzing our capabilities, identifying our weaknesses. They had very detailed plans for the conquest of every major population center in the galaxy." The display changed to show a series of documents in alien script, with translations appearing alongside. These are the Nexari invasion plans for Alterius Prime. According to their analysis, your world would have fallen within 6 hours of the initial attack. Your population centers would have been bombed into rubble. Your military would have been overwhelmed before they could mount any significant resistance. An estimated 2.3 billion Alterians would have been killed in the first day alone. Velnoth stared at the documents, his anger gradually giving way to what looked like horror. The reason your people are alive today, Martinez continued, is because human forces destroyed the Nexari fleet before it could reach your system. The reason your cities are intact is because human intelligence identified and eliminated Nexari sabotage cells that had already infiltrated your government. The reason your children still have a future is because humans were willing to die to protect them. We didn't know. Of course you didn't know. We didn't tell you. We didn't want to panic the civilian population while we were dealing with the threat. But, Governor, the fact that you didn't know doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't change what's about to happen. Martinez gestured, and the display switched to show the star map with the approaching invasion fleets. These are the next wave of attackers. They'll be here in 18 months, and according to the intelligence we captured, they're not planning to make the same mistakes their predecessors made. They know about human tactics now. They know about our weapons, our ships, our strategies. They're coming prepared to fight us specifically. What? What are you saying? I'm saying that the war isn't over, Governor. It's just beginning. And I'm saying that if your people want to survive what's coming, you need to let us do our job. The connection ended. Martinez turned back to Veltar, her expression unreadable. That intelligence you showed him, Veltar said quietly, is it real? Every word of it. And the approaching fleets? Also real. Veltar considered this. But that wasn't really what you were threatening him with, was it? Martinez smiled, and for the first time, Veltar saw something in her expression that truly frightened him. Admiral, the Nexari taught us something very important about warfare. They showed us that the most effective way to defeat an enemy isn't to fight them directly. It's to make them irrelevant. What do you mean? Look around you, Martinez said, gesturing toward the command center. This station coordinates the movements of 15,000 ships from 47 different species. Every major trade route in the galaxy is protected by vessels under human command. Every strategic resource is allocated according to human priority assessments. Every planetary defense system is integrated into our early warning network. Veltar felt a chill run through his carapace as the implications became clear. We're not occupying council space, Martinez continued. We're not ruling through force or intimidation. We're simply making ourselves indispensable. Every world depends on us for protection. Every government relies on our intelligence networks. Every economy is integrated with our logistical systems. And if a world decides they don't want human protection, then they don't get it. Martinez's voice was matter of fact. And when the next invasion comes, they face it alone? That's blackmail, coercion. Yes, it is. Martinez nodded. But it's also effective. And right now, effectiveness is the only thing that matters. Veltar stared out at the blue-green world below them. Earth had come so far from the primitive, war-torn planet he had once prepared to sterilize, but in some ways, it hadn't changed at all. This isn't what we intended when we showed you mercy, he said quietly. No, Martinez agreed. I don't suppose it was. But Admiral, intentions don't matter when you're facing extinction. Results matter. Survival matters. Everything else is luxury. She paused, looking out at the same vista. Your people made a choice 15 years ago. You decided that humanity was worth saving despite our violent nature. You gave us a chance to prove ourselves, to find a purpose beyond our own destruction. Well, we found that purpose. We became the galaxy's protectors, its defenders, its warriors, its rulers, if that's what it takes. Martinez turned to face him again. Admiral, every species in this galaxy owes their continued existence to human military leadership. Every world that wasn't conquered by the Nexari was saved by human sacrifice. Every child that will grow up free from alien tyranny has that freedom because humans were willing to fight for it. And the price for that freedom is accepting human authority. The price for that freedom is acknowledging reality. Humans are better at war than anyone else in this galaxy. That's not opinion, it's demonstrated fact. And until the universe stops trying to kill us all, that makes us the most qualified to make the decisions that matter. A new alert chimed, and another human officer appeared on the display. Director Martinez, we're receiving a transmission from the Cathara High Council. They're requesting an urgent meeting to discuss the post-war transition of authority. Tell them we'll be happy to discuss it, Martinez replied. Schedule the meeting for next week. On Earth. Yes, ma'am. The transmission ended, and Martinez turned back to Veltar. They want to negotiate the return of normal governance, she said. They want to pretend that everything can go back to the way it was before the war. Can't it? Admiral, there is no before the war. The galaxy that existed before the Nexari invasion is gone. It died the moment we proved that Council civilization couldn't defend itself without help. What exists now is a new reality, one where humans are responsible for keeping everyone alive. She walked to the window, looking down at the planet that had become the center of galactic civilization. Your people showed us mercy once, she said. They gave us a chance to be something more than what we were. Well, we took that chance. We became something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that could protect everyone else from the dangers of the universe. Even if they don't want to be protected? Especially if they don't want to be protected. Martinez smiled again, and this time, Veltar thought he understood what humanity's enemies must have felt when they saw that expression. Admiral, we learned something very important from the species that showed us mercy. We learned that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to force people to accept help they don't want to receive. And the galaxy will just accept this? The galaxy will accept whatever keeps them alive. And if they don't, Martinez shrugged. Well then, they'll learn what the Nexari learned, that humans keep their promises, whether those promises were asked for or not. As Veltar left the station and returned to his ship, he found himself thinking about that moment 15 years ago when he had stood above Earth, ready to destroy humanity rather than let them spread their violence to the stars. His people had chosen mercy instead. They had given humanity a chance to prove they could be something other than conquerors, and they had been right. Humanity wasn't conquerors. They were something far more effective. They were saviors who wouldn't take no for an answer. The galaxy was safe now, safer than it had ever been, whether it wanted to be or not. And perhaps, Veltar reflected as his ship jumped to hyperspace, that was exactly what mercy looked like when it was offered by a species that had never learned the difference between salvation and conquest. The Cathara had shown mercy to humanity. Now, humanity would show mercy to the galaxy. The consequences would reverberate for generations to come.